in right, right sealing and the flashing is probably the most important thing. Because you don't want to put leaks in your roof.
One other thing is, if you are, sometimes you're up here and you pry up the shingle, and then the next course of shingles, I'll do it on, say this one for instance, you pry up the shingle, and then this next course of shingle you have a nail there. And then you can't get your flashing up where you need to. Because you know, I said start at the bottom layer of shingle, or towards the bottom of the shingle, but as people know in roofs, the shingle line always isn't straight, so sometimes you might be half in and out of a shingle line, and then that puts you getting stuck into this nail up here, these two nails. So what you could do is just reach up underneath and just ever so gingerly pop that nail out and then come back up and pull it through and pull the other one through. And then what we like to do is just hit it with a little silicone to help seal this back down. You could use Solar Seal or GE silicone meant for roofs. They're both equally as good.
What about just cutting it?
And you can cut these. They say in the user manual that you want to actually cut a little V-notch into it, but that's really turned into a pain. So it's a lot easier just to pop the nail out. Just because you cut your V-notch into it, and then you go get it in there, and it's not quite exactly right, so you cut it again, and you cut it again, and then yeah. Then you're cursing and throwing stuff off.
Blair, did you mention the question about snow with the racks going this way?
Oh yes, that was my point of it. So 20 minutes later, here's your L foot on the roof. Your L foot keeps your rack off the roof. So it's not like snow and ice is going to build. It's not like this rack is laying flat on the roof. It's not going to worry about anything building up there. Yeah, you'll have some leaves and stuff build up, maybe around these L feet or whatever, but nothing too extreme. But you'll actually have, this will be off the roof. We prefer putting everything into this. You notice there's two holes on the top. We prefer just going in the top hole, simply because every roof isn't perfect as you go across it. So that gives you, we put it in the top, and then we pull, as we put the rack in, we pull everything up to the top of the hole, to the slotted hole. We pull it up to the top and then tighten it down, so that way after we have all of our rails established, going down the roof, and everything's pulled up to the top, and there's bumps and valleys and everything in the roof, then we'll take our chalk line or a straight line, but since the chalk line's already on the roof, we'll take the chalk line as a straight line and go across each rail and say, okay, this one's a little bit higher, this one's a little bit higher, so we know they're as high as they are, so we can bump the other ones down, or bump the one down that is high. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions?
How many rails per panel?
It depends on what system you're going with. The longest they make the rails is 240 inches, which is 20 feet. As you're doing your measurements, we suggest that you convert everything to simply inches. So that way you're not trying to do the math. As you're measuring everything out, just convert it right there on your sketch to inches. It's a lot easier than having to write it down again or do the math or whip out a calculator or something. So,
you said the panel was 65 inches, so you need two rails, one top, one bottom?
yes. So if, say this roof space was your panel, you would need one top and bottom, 2 rails per panel, and then you can get the rail lengths in up to 20 feet, and then there's splice bars that come with that you can splice them together wherever. But if you go with 7 panels, you might not be getting, you might be getting a 240 inch, rather than getting a 240 inch rail and a 40 inch rail, you're going to be getting, 2 168 inch rails or something like that.
And if you ran the panels sideways, horizontal,
Yeah.
would you have to run the rails up and down?
You can run them horizontal also
Okay.
with the panels, but that would just mean you'd have a lot longer rails.
Right.
So you'd be paying more for rails and L feet and penetrations in your roof and all that. So
Having been on a roof that did the rails vertical, it's a lot easier doing it horizontal.
Oh, yeah.
Stand up.
oh yeah, yeah. How many people have something like worse than a 6 on 12 pitch that they're trying to do? Yeah. So, yeah, it's, you know, at first, we've done metal roofs that are pretty extreme. We've done 10-degree roofs, and it's a little bit tough at first, but once you get that first rail, that's really your ladder. And then you work off of that one, and all your feet are established, and you just keep working up, and it actually becomes quite simple to work off until you actually work your panels down, and then you get to the last one, and if you're 20 feet in the air trying to work it off of a ladder, then that's a little hectic too, but yes.
Is there only one rail between panels, vertical?
One rail between panels?
Yeah, if your system was 3 panels high, the ones in the middle, there's only a single rail.
No. Each panel will have 2 rails in it.
So
You'll have-
amount of 2 rails together, if you're 2 panels high?
So every row of panels needs 2 rails.
Okay.
So you want to go back to that first
Yeah.
slide there? The diagram. So then, say this was a layout on a roof. So you had a dormer or a gable end coming off that side. Here's your 6 panels. You have a rail 12 to 15 inches up from the bottom, and then you have a rail 12 to 15 inches down from the top. And then you've got the same thing here, 12 to 15, 12 to 15, and then on up. So for these 3 rows, you would have 6 rows of rails. And you can simply just do that, you know, once you have that first roof rafter established, and then you find a second one, and then you know if you haven't climbed up in your attic to see what your spacing is like, then you've established that, okay, I'm at, 2 foot on center, then you know how to space everything out, and then you can do 65 inches, you go 15 inches down, then you go, numbers guy,
If you're 65 inches, you start 15,
yeah,
then you go another
30 and then 15, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
whatever.
something like that, yeah.
So how close are your panels in the rows?
Your row spacing, you could put them tight if you want. We typically try to do like a 1/2 inch gap, just because sometimes you get a little bit of a panel that's off by like a 1/16 of an inch on square, and you could hide that a lot of times. Imperfections with the roof. Sometimes your rails aren't perfect either because of the measurements and the shingles and all that stuff. They don't always go perfect. But usually we like to try to give about a 1/2 inch, or even we've done it sometimes where we've cut a piece of cardboard and just set it in there and brought the other panel up tight to the first row and then run it across. Yes?
You just want to point out where the microinverters go, because that might be a little confusing, that diagram up there,
Yeah, okay.
as far as the spacing between the panels.
Yes, so where do the microinverters go? You have your rails. Yeah, you have your top and bottom rail. And with this top and bottom rail, if your panel is covering this area, your microinverter should be relatively in the center. Usually, say you're 40 inches wide, and your dead center would be 20 inches then, and usually we go off center by whichever way we're running. Say all of our electrical connections are on that end, and the cable that the inverter plugs into, that's all running to that direction. So, the dead center of the panel is here. We're going to put our inverter just off of center.
But the point is, that diagram is misleading. You may think it's below the panel on the roof. It's under the panel, not
Yeah.
below.
Is it under the center of the panel, or is it close to
Or
the rail?
it's on a rail. It's
Yeah.
mounted on a rail. And you can do it kind of toward the left side or toward the right side, depending which way the electric
Yeah.
wires run.
So that's I just described the actual, the mounting here. You're tucked up underneath. You have your washer, and then your spacer, your washer, your L-foot, your washer, and your lag, and then you're coming up here. There's a 9/16 bolt that slides in here, and there's a nut that goes on the other end. You're mounted here. Once you have your rails all established, the splices from one to the other, that's just another little gadget that slides in here, and you bolt it together. And then a little jumper wire that goes across. This might seem like a lot of information I'm spitting at you, and I'm not really showing you all the details tonight. We will have everything next week. I just kind of want to throw some information at you now so you have a little bit to digest until tomorrow, and then we can actually get up and do a little more hands-on. What is that? Is that clock right back there?
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, so you have your rails mounted here, you have a lower rail, and you mount your inverter to the upper rail, because that's where the connections are on the panel too. So you basically on center, a little bit off center, whichever way you prefer, but you mount your inverter. Once your inverter's mounted, then you have what is called the trunk cable, and that's what the inverters plug into. So your panel has 2 leads, plugs into the inverter, and then your inverter has 1 lead that plugs into the trunk cable, and that's the trunk cable that you run to your basement. Yeah, we can get into that.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you ever change the height of the rails if the pitch of the roof isn't ideal? Can you ever angle the panels by changing, so one of the rails maybe is higher?
You can.
Repeat the question.
Oh, yes. If you want, say, you're saying with your bottom and your top L foot, if you want to put this one in the top slot and this one in the bottom slot,
Or
Or-
can you even do it more than that, so that you can angle your panel quite a bit if the pitch of your roof isn't what it needs to be?
I wouldn't get too hung up on the 30 degrees thing. That's not really all too critical. More so facing south. I mean, 30 degrees is ideal. Rough 28 to 30 degrees is ideal, but don't lose any sleep over it. Because especially if you're doing 2 rows and then you tilt this panel up, and then the next panel is tilted up a little bit, well then this
So you're gonna
upper
shadow-
part of this panel is going to shadow that one a little bit. And then if snow goes to slide off of this one, then it's going to get jammed behind here. And aesthetically, it doesn't look that good. I think we did one roof where we actually tilted the panels to just maximize everything. And if you do the calculations and everything, because once you tilt the panel, then you have to space this one back so far because of the shading issue. And then you lose all that real estate to fit panels, so it's almost like sometimes you're better off just covering the whole roof with panels and having a little bit less production than it is to do less panels and shade and then tilt it and have it look like a circus on your roof, and then, yeah, it gets a little weird.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Did you say you should be able to see the inverters from the ground?
No, you should not. Once you have your rail set up, and your panels and everything are all mounted, once you're all done, you're zip tying all the cables and stuff to the rail. So when you stand back underneath your roof and you look up underneath, all you should see is your L feet and your rail, and maybe some black zip ties on it, but you should never see any wires hanging and touching the roof. If they're touching the roof, that's actually like a code violation. Again, not that inspectors would really necessarily know that, but we've seen a couple other installations that we've been called in on that they're bad.
The insulation on the cable will wear in the main,
So,
Yeah.
and Jack's gonna bring up some videos just so you can see a little bit more than me holding some stuff up. I'm gonna grab some water.